Aloha, everyone. Welcome to the Coconut Wireless. This is Mel Raposo, and I appreciate all of you coming in tonight. Tonight we are. Oh my God! Yeah, there we go. Live is always surprising because you always screw up. But anyway, tonight I got a very special show, a very I guess controversial topic, and it's the legalization of recreational or commercialization of marijuana here in Hawaii. And I think you'll be pleased with our guest tonight. So let's get started. All right, folks. Let's just bring them on one time. Here we go, guys. Tonight we have with us Steve Alm, former United States attorney, former Hawaii Circuit Court judge, and currently the prosecuting attorney on the city and county of Honolulu. Welcome, Steve. Thank you for joining us. As you can see, the blank spot right there, Representative Darius Kila. He is in a finance committee meeting right now, and he'll be joining us a little later. So you can just ignore that blank spot there. We have Kauai Police Chief Todd Raybuck. I was reading your bio, Chief. I was kind of impressed. You started off in the Air Force as a military police officer. Went to Las Vegas Metro, and assignments included commander of the Organized Crime Bureau and a covert detective in the department's Vice, Narcotics, and Criminal Intelligence units. Also, you got a Director's Award for Excellence from the Office of National Drug Control Policy, and also co-wrote a book called Involved: Parents' Connection to Drug Prevention. So I didn't know that, and I'm very happy to hear that because I think that qualifies you as an expert. And of course, the village's favorite doctor, Dr. Scott Miskovich, family physician, owner of the Windward Primary Care Physicians, but more importantly, serves as a chairman of the State of Hawaii Narcotics Working Group, where he focuses on reducing overdose deaths while promoting best practices in pain management. And I welcome all of you to the show. And how are you guys all doing? How are you guys all doing? Well, you know what? Again, I screwed up. I muted you all, and I got to unmute you all. I am going to start off with the prosecuting attorney, Steve Alm, only because he is kind of leading the charge. I know there's a lot of people that are on both sides of the issue. Legalization of recreational marijuana, which has been attempted many times in the past, but this year the legislature, with the support of our governor, is really trying to move this forward. So let's start with you.
Okay. When I was a judge for 15 years and as the U.S. attorney, I mostly focused on methamphetamine, cocaine, and in court alcohol. Uh, but then, like 9 months ago, we really started looking at this and doing research and talking to local experts, but looking at the mainland because places like Colorado have 10 years of experience with legalized marijuana. And the situation right now is we have medical marijuana. Uh, Small possession has been decriminalized. And so we were looking at what happened. And what I discovered was kind of alarming. You have more fatal car collisions, you have more emergency room visits, more hospitalizations. And I think a couple of things are really important. This is not the weed of people's childhood or high school days. It's not 3% THC, which is the active ingredient. In stores now, it's 20, 30, 40%, and concentrates are up to 99%. And any place that legalizes marijuana commercially ends up with a lot more users. You end up with a bigger black market. And locally, one of the real surprising things we learned was that the visitor industry told us that because there's such a stigma in Japan, Korea, and elsewhere, if we legalize commercial marijuana in Hawaii, the Japanese tourists are going to stop coming. And our economy is so fragile that we couldn't take that. The last thing I want to mention right at the start is that when we've spoken to a number of legislators, I think there's a feeling that this is inevitable, that all the states are going to do this. And so we talked to the folks at Smart Approaches of Marijuana a week ago. And last year in 2023, 26 states considered should we legalize commercial marijuana. And the results were really surprising. Only 5 states said yes, 21 said no. So I think the momentum is shifting because you can't go more than a few days without seeing a new story of a study. Today's was from CBS News, where the Journal of the American Heart Association talked about odds of a heart attack for daily marijuana users were 25% higher than non-users and 40% higher for stroke. So we're getting regular information about what the problems are, and I think we can educate our legislators, and hopefully they won't want to go down this road that you can never turn back from.
Thank you, Steve. And yeah, and in fact, let me play this very short clip. And this was from one of the sessions we all attended, well, not all, but most of us attended. And let me just play this real quick because it ties right into what you said about the Japanese market.
It's believed tourism could be negatively impacted.
Possession and the use of marijuana is not accepted at all in the Japanese society. People may further speculate the ties with organized crime groups. And the Japanese media and public view of the marijuana is extremely negative.
Extremely negative. You were there, Steve. The chief, you were there. We were in an Ala Moana hotel. Also, the South Korean visitor industry official said the same thing. And those are two markets that our visitor industry relies on. So thank you for.
Well, and that was and that Mr. Kubo, he is head of the Japanese American Travel Agency that together bring in just under 1 million Japanese tourists a year in 2019 pre-COVID. If he's even half right, it would really hurt our economy. And if he's right, it would it would ruin our state.
Yeah, he gave us the warning. He gave
Yep.
us the warning. Chief Raybuck, I know many of our viewers here probably expect what you're going to say because you're the chief of police, and but you gave some really good testimony this morning at our council meeting. But why don't you start off by sharing, what your thoughts are as far as this movement towards legalizing recreational, commercialized marijuana?
Yeah, thank you, Mel. Thank you for allowing me to be here. So, as you mentioned in the intro, I started my law enforcement career in Las Vegas back in 1992, and during that time in Las Vegas, I was assigned to work narcotics, undercover narcotics, for 5 years. And it was during that time actually where I learned that the state of Nevada in 2001 was looking to legalize marijuana recreational, 3 ounces actually of marijuana in the state. And I was actually confused because I looked at it, and as a narcotics detective, I was curious as to why in Nevada, just like here in Hawaii, they had already done some decriminalization matters. Medical marijuana had already been legalized, and so why this next step? And so I started looking at the arguments of the proponents for legalizing marijuana, and one of the things they said was the tens of thousands of people that were locked up in prison as a result of simple possession of marijuana. And I'll say something that most people will probably not expect me to say tonight. I was thinking, what the heck are we doing? Why are we arresting people for small amounts of marijuana and putting them in prison for simple possession? And that kind of then made me start to dig deeper into the facts, and I found out that those were not the facts. In fact, the majority of people who are incarcerated for simple possession of marijuana were actually there because they were either pled their cases down or they were there for much more serious offenses, including the possession of marijuana. So those statistics were twisted. And the reality is that today you don't hear the proponents of it talking about how many people are in prison for simple possession of marijuana anymore, because as Prosecutor Alm pointed out, we're not doing that anymore, and we shouldn't, quite frankly, do that. And the state of Hawaii has already resolved that. But 21 years ago was the first time I actually started to speak out against the legalization of marijuana. And I'll clarify for your viewers, I'm not a prophet, but many of the challenges that we talked about, we'll talk about tonight, and many of the things that people say wouldn't happen. Uh, I said in 2001 or 2001, 2002, that those things would happen because it's inevitable for those things to happen, and they did. We have proof of that today. And so I just hope that our viewers tonight will recognize that and listen to this conversation because it's an important conversation that will, if this matter uh, is approved and signed into law, it will forever change our communities. It will forever change our families, and we will never go back from it. And we will all suffer the long term consequences as a result of it.
Thank you, Chief. Yeah. And, oftentimes we hear from our constituents, hey, don't telling people, don't come here and, bring your ideas and your, where you coming from? You want Hawaii? Let's keep Hawaii, Hawaii. We don't have to be like California. We don't have to be like Nevada. We definitely don't want to be like Colorado based on what we learned yesterday. But yeah, it's that's my concern. Once we open that door, we're not going to be able to close it. So now, Dr. Miskovich, you are a medical doctor, and you actually your practice does involve pain management using medical marijuana. Now, most people would expect you to say, "Yeah, man, let's just legalize it," but no, you see it a little differently. So why don't you share your experience and tell us, give us your thoughts?
Thanks, Mel. And I guess it's good to be back on the wireless here and with you. We've spent a lot of time together. I have all types of presents that I could talk about. I'm going to condense it, and I'm going to, for the viewers who know me or those who don't, I'm going to focus on the medical facts because that's what I do. I look at the strong medical evidence that exists, and everything I'm going to be just briefly mentioning is within the last year, and it's from the top journals, whether it's JAMA. Some things will be directly from CDC, but I'll go through fairly quickly because the way we're having this conversing. And I'll skip and start with something that I think Steve just, Prosecutor Alm said that, you know, one of the studies we just had talked about the fact that basically adults in the United States believe that the the smoke you inhale versus primarily smoking on your own or secondhand smoke from marijuana is much safer than cigarette smoke. So false, very false. It is more dangerous and more damning to the lungs. And Steve just brought up the fact that there is another study that comes out and shows the effects. And we could list studies that go on that people that smoke on a regular basis are going to have a much higher chance of developing COPD and lung damage. Now, one of the things also we have to, since we're kind of talking, I'm talking generally right now, um, so we had legalization, as you said, 10 years ago or so. Back 10 years ago, the average adult use in across the country was about 13%. Then in 2017, it went up to 17%. Then in 2021, it goes up to 25%. Now in 2022, it's 28% in the 30 to 50-year-old age group. So that's significant. Now that times and parallels the advent of the commercialization and legalization across the country. So that's just those are facts. And then the next issue is that we're also seeing the same thing now, a significant increase from 12% up to the same time period in the 19 to 30-year-old age group, increasing use, and they've 100% increase in vaping of marijuana, which can be much more effectively getting the THC or CBD into the bloodstream, causing the effects. Um, I'll just touch on it. Since legalization, I'm not going to go real detailed into the study. Major increase in the perinatal findings in pregnant mothers. So basically, pregnant mothers which will almost always have different types of drug tests, are going up as high as 25% will be coming in during the pregnancy with positive THC. And what we do know is very much tied with autism spectrum disorder, attention deficit ADD, as well as others. So there it is. It's getting into our pregnant moms. Then I think this is one that if you're not worried about, you need to wake up. Adolescence. Um, the adolescent brain we know is just still developing. It's still developing the whole ways up to 16 to 18 years old. And the things that have been shown with regular marijuana use in that age group are decreased processing speed, decreased attention, decreased memory, decreased judgment, decreased problem solving, decision making, self regulation. Okay, those are facts that happen because of the way the endocannabinoid system works in the brain. Um, and basically, the perception is when in states where there is commercialization, legalization, is since it's legal, it's not harmful. So, therefore, what happens? Use goes up younger and younger and younger. And so, in the last 4 or 5 years, we've had 12 years old has gone from 16% up to 18%. So there, you have to be concerned across the board, adolescent use. Um, then you get down into the younger kids. Major increases in across the country during legalization have occurred in emergency visits and poison control calls, ER toxicity from younger kids below those ages getting edibles and eating it. So that's another issue we have. So and if you're noting, I've already covered no age group is safe across the board. It continues to increase. Now, final thing I'm going to mention just to highlight this again so everybody understands this. Everybody that looks at marijuana say that's no big deal. Why are you worried about it? Well, guess what? CDC data, this is not my data, this study. When you have the potency now that is available of marijuana, and you have a new onset, new start of marijuana in the adult age group, 3 out of 10, 30% will develop what we call in the medical world substance use disorder. People will know it as addiction. And that will usually occur within the first 2 weeks. Within the first 2 weeks of starting to use it, certain people who have chemical pathways in their brain that they're born with, it's not a decision, will get these dopamine and serotonin and these surges of they feel good, they like what they're doing, which will cause them to use it more and more. In the adolescent brain, depending on the study, it's upwards of 44% or 4 out of 10 will develop substance use disorder associated with it. Um, I'll stop at that, and I could say a lot more, but those are some of the really, really big issues. And let me add one comment in. I've been in some of the different meetings, and we had at our last meeting that Prosecutor Alm had, we had Alan Johnson, who is the head of Hinamalka, our largest inpatient treatment facility. He's also the head of the Hawaii Council for Substance Abuse. Upwards of 75% of everyone that he has and is treating now over the last 4 to 5 years has the carried diagnosis of cannabis substance use disorder. So this is real. These are life-changing events for people, and it's just not a benign thing. But I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, because I know there is a lot of discussion about marijuana not being addictive, and I've read enough studies that it is, and I think you explained that based on medical fact. Years ago, we were having similar discussions when the state was looking at legalizing medical marijuana, and it came with promises, right? It came with assurances that two things: number one, um, the black market would go away, and I wanted to touch on that and get Steve and the chief's thoughts on the black market. What do we see today? Did in fact the black market go away when we legalized medical marijuana? I don't think you need to be an expert to figure that one out.
No,
So yeah, Steve, let's start with you.
it's true in Hawaii and it's true everywhere that, as the doctor said, if they legalize commercial marijuana, you're saying this is safe. So you're telling adults, kids, whoever, this is safe. And when you set up a tax structure for the commercial legalization, it's going to be more expensive than the black market. So the black market grows, it gets bigger. They're always going to be able to sell it cheaper. And it isn't a guy in a trench coat in a corner whispering, it's Joe down the street who they've bought dope from for years. They're going to keep buying dope, from Joe because they know him. And that, the question, it's only come up a few times here in Hawaii, but fentanyl being, added to the marijuana, we have had a couple of cases of that. And people think that that's a reason to legalize it. Well, if the commercial stores actually do the testing, which is a haphazard business, then that might protect what they've actually tested. But most people are going to buy it from the black market. And that means if you legalize it commercially, you're increasing the chances that people could get, some fentanyl laced marijuana. It just increases it when you do something like that. And I think the reason this is such a difficult issue is for some adults who have gotten used to it, it is recreational. Uh, but for many others, 1/3 are going to develop substance use disorder. You're going to have more fatal car crashes. You got kids going to the emergency room because they think they're going crazy. So I think the other part of it is people honestly are thinking back to their high school days where a joint may have been 3% THC and they smoked it and they think, what's the big deal? Same thing with the effect on the teenage brain. But when it's 20, 30, 40% or concentrates 95%, it's a totally different drug. And so the potency is a huge issue that we got to keep emphasizing because it's a different drug. And that's why it's addictive. That's why it's so harmful to teenagers.
Chief, you were in Nevada when medical marijuana was illegal, and you saw the transition into recreational marijuana. What did you observe as, again, someone with their boots on the ground that was working in the narcotics world? Did you witness any reduction in the black market when that transition occurred to commercialized recreational marijuana?
Yeah, I'll speak to that just in a second, but I want to reemphasize what both the doctor and prosecutor Alm have said about this drug. I think it's important that we clarify the misconception that marijuana is some sort of a sedative or it just mellows people out, and the worst thing that they could do is get tired and get the munchies. The reality is as both the doctor and the prosecutor have pointed out, marijuana today is a very dangerous drug that it's being sold at very high level concentrations of THC. And THC is the mind altering psychoactive drug that's inside the cannabis or the marijuana plant. And so what that means is marijuana is actually a hallucinogen. It is classified as a hallucinogen. It is not a sedative. It's a hallucinogen. So when you talk about hallucinogens, you're talking about like LSD, PSP, and or PCP and other types of hallucinogens like ketamine. And so when you start talking about high doses and repeated uses, you're talking about increases of hallucinogenic properties that sometimes result in very, very traumatic incidents for the users and those around them. So to answer your question, yeah, in 2017, the state in Nevada legalized marijuana. And listen, Nevada tried to do it right, just like every other state, and Hawaii is claiming they will try to do their best to make it right. The reality is of the 23 states that have done this experiment, all of them have failed. The only thing that has actually uh, been successful is creating a commercialized market that has expanded the use of marijuana, put marijuana shops in our neighborhoods, and allowed kids to walk past huge marijuana grows in their neighbors' yards. And so the black market does not get eliminated. In fact, every state that has done this, and you can read the headlines, don't take my word for it, has seen significant increases in the illicit and black market. In fact, in Nevada, I don't like statistics all that much because people get bored with statistics. But the reality is that our homicides, drug-related homicides, specifically regarding marijuana, increased significantly between 2016 and 2017. Armed robberies. What started happening was all of these illicit drug entities started uh, taking shape to capitalize on consumers' desire to obtain marijuana. And so criminal gangs started setting up illegal dispensary services that were nothing more than fronting people that they knew would show up with money, and they would commit robberies. Tourists, we talked about tourists a few times. Right now, the largest concentration of marijuana shops in Las Vegas are all within walking distance of the tourist corridor. You cannot, why? Because they want to market to tourists. You cannot walk down Las Vegas Boulevard today without inhaling marijuana in every step. And so it does dramatically change that all around. But it's not just the black market. So in California, they did an audit. They found nearly 3,000 illegal marijuana businesses. And that was dwarfing the legal businesses in California. And it's being tied back to Colombian, to Cuban, to Mexican cartels that are running huge illicit drug operations, resulting in significant violence. In fact, just this month, the report out of California was there was an armed turf war where there was a mass murder of 6 individuals that were brutally killed over a marijuana operation. But it extends beyond that now because a recent report, a recent bipartisan group of 50 members of Congress sent a letter to the U.S. attorney saying that China is starting to buy up properties in the United States in Maine, Oregon, Oklahoma, and California that all have legal marijuana commercialized markets. And they're buying up those properties and now creating illicit marijuana drug industry that is capturing billions of dollars that they are now sending back to mainland China to finance the Chinese Communist government. And so this scheme and this idea that the illicit market goes away with the commercialized market is absolutely false.
Yeah, and I know that the proponents, continue to dispel the facts. The China story. I read the article. This was a legitimate, factual article that included the memos that were sent from the White House to the DEA and to other agencies sharing their concern because that is what is happening. And I got to tell you, I am concerned, Chief, and I mean, no disrespect to the Kauai Police Department, but we have a very small department with very limited resources. There was talk about departments having to establish new units just to address the illicit, illegal marijuana operations that will happen under really the protection of the legal sites, right? Because if you have 100 legal shops, and there's no limit. If you look at the bill, there's no limits to how many shops, how many plants. There's not even a limit to the THC content in these products that is going to be sold on the street. But we just don't have the resources. And this is where I want to get to the next point because what the legislature or the supporters will tell you, that is what we will generate the funds for. And we know for a fact that it's $38 million just to get this program off the ground. We won't see any rules and and policies in place for another year and a half. But for $38 million is what it's going to cost just to kick this off the ground, to create this new agency that's going to oversee this. But if you look at the states that have, uh, again, promised their constituents that they were going to have this influx of cash, if you look at the real numbers, it's a very small percentage of their budgets. It's a very small percentage of their budgets. And real quick, I know I don't like statistics either, but Colorado, 0.7% of their budget. Washington, 0.7%. California, they cut their marijuana taxes because the marijuana industry complained to the legislature saying, hey, you guys are charging us too much. We're having a hard time surviving. So the legislature reduced the taxes down to where it's only now less than 0.5% of their budget, and they're facing a huge deficit. And in Oregon, it's less than 3%. The important thing that I wanted to talk about, and I wanted to get all of your, and I'll get the doctors first because it involves health consequences. The Centennial Institute of Colorado, Colorado Christian University, estimated that every dollar in marijuana tax revenue is associated with $4.50 in costs. These costs range from increased traffic deaths to lost productivity. Its report stated that, quote, that costs associated with commercial marijuana are only going to go up as the long-term health consequences have not been fully determined. We just heard today, it was crazy. I was getting ready for the show and I saw on the news the new report that just came out about now they have definite evidence and data to show that there is a direct link from daily marijuana use to cardiac problems. So, Doc, let's start with you. What are the true costs of
Mel,
the legal?
it's like you read my mind because I was just listening to the chief and listening to what you were saying. And I was, before you even prompted this question, I was going to raise my hand and say, wait. Okay, people need to understand, most people do not know that 40% of the state of Hawaii is on MedQuest. Okay. And it's based on the fact that it's based on our cost of living, and a family of four has to be making so much so you can be eligible for MedQuest. So what that means is 40% of the health care in the state of Hawaii is paid by our tax dollars, federal tax dollars, right? So that is anyone who goes and gets that substance use disorder treatment, or anyone who goes to emergency room visit, or anyone who's in a car accident or anything like that, it's paid for by tax dollars. With the biggest cost being like we said, the substance use. Then you translate over to the pulmonary effects, right? So major significance when it comes to the COPD, the asthma, the wheezing, which has its own, daily cost associated with whether it's medications. But as you alluded to, we know that the data is clear that the risk will go for long-term pulmonary consequences will go up in the adult population, where the kids, it will happen, they're going to develop the same type of thing, they're going to be on their asthma inhalers a lot earlier, and the cancer risks are going to go up, plain and simple. And so therefore, life lost, life shortened by cancer, immense amount of medical costs associated with cancer treatment, hospitalizations. So, and then finally, I want to throw this one out because this one is something that I don't ever see in any of the talks. You kind of alluded to it though, Mel, is work. We have like practically below zero unemployment. It's hard to find employees in the state. And guess what? Time off, people missing work goes up in, when there's regular marijuana use. Then we have the issue with drug testing at work because it will remain in the system. You will not have an effective way if an employer has a drug testing policy. There will be no effective way to include this in understanding whether someone gets in an accident, runs over a person while they're at work, or drops in a wall on somebody or something like that, whether they were currently exhibiting substance use and under the auspices of THC or CBD. So that it will really screw up employers too if you're not thinking about the medical stuff, because you're not going to be able to hold an employee responsible.
Yeah, and I was reading today that there are many companies now in the states that have legalized recreational marijuana that now they're changing their employment policies, where now in their drug testing panels they're not testing for marijuana. And there's, I forget what state, I think it might have been New York. One of the states actually passed a law that says you cannot terminate a
That's a
person for failing a drug test with marijuana.
that's
Again,
a point.
it's the minimization, and I'm afraid that once you legalize recreational marijuana, all of these other things will follow here in Hawaii. I'm not sure how you deal with it. NBA now, right? Took marijuana out of their screening panel. Many Amazon took their marijuana out of their screening panel, because it that's just the way this world is going. And I think, as the chief was saying, if you poll the communities, whatever, 70+% say they support the legalization of marijuana, or recreational marijuana. But I think what I want to try to talk about with all of you, and Steve, you and the chief are both in the field. You guys are doing these things.
Yeah.
Legalizing recreational marijuana is not just allowing people to buy from a store versus a drug dealer. There's issues such as the chief mentioned earlier. These drugstores are going to be everywhere, because there are no limits in the bill, and it could end up next to your house or next to your place of business. What are your thoughts?
Right. And part of it is, it's sad on the mainland and different places. You have more liquor stores in the ghetto, and the way our bill is written, they've got this kooky idea called social equity, where if somebody was convicted of a marijuana, like distribution conviction in the past, they would go to the head of the line to get a marijuana license. And they talk about communities that have high crime communities, uh, challenge communities. They would be able to get marijuana stores, and they'd be able to get fields. And so that would mean, here on Oahu, I live in Kaimuki, there'd be a weed store there, there'd be a weed store in Manoa, there'd be 5 in Kalihi, 5 on the Waianae coast. Our kids are behind in school right now. The last thing they need is that. And the whole thing about polls is the way you ask the question. If you ask just, hey, what do you think about legalizing marijuana? You're going to get a majority say yes. But if you ask the question, if we already have medical marijuana and we have decriminalized possession of small amounts, do you think we should pass commercial marijuana? You'd get a totally different result. And the chief and I can go on a long time, but one of the scary parts to me is right now, law enforcement has no way to test whether somebody's under the influence of marijuana, like when they're driving. So if a guy's weaving on the road, police officer pulls him over, he fails a field sobriety test, gets arrested for DUI, takes him down to the station, they blow zeros on the intoxilizer, the officer's going to let him go because they don't have a test. When you read about states like Colorado having almost twice as many fatal car collisions after they legalized marijuana, the reason is, just like in Hawaii, if there's an injury or death, then blood can be drawn from the person driving. But that's blood, alcohol testing right now for DUI is a breath test. The public would put up with that. The public would never put up with a blood draw or an observed urine test for driving under the influence. So there's so many problems. The way the bill is written, impacting our low income communities, is not a bug. It's a feature of it that makes absolutely no sense to me.
And that's providing the legislature doesn't pass that ridiculous law that will prohibit police officers from making arrests for misdemeanors and petty misdemeanors. But that's for a whole nother discussion. That is for a whole nother show. Uh, uh, Chief, Chief, I kind of alluded to it, but as far as Kauai is concerned and the resources that you have or don't have, how difficult would it be for Kauai Police Department and the people of Kauai to be confident or comfortable with the ability of Kauai Police Department currently uh, to properly enforce and go out and regulate legalization of marijuana?
Yeah, it's a good question. I appreciate you asking it because, as you know, and most of our community knows, I have a hiring problem, and the doctor talked about it earlier. Right, we have almost zero unemployment here, and then to hire police officers today is harder than it ever has been in my 30 plus years of policing. But I want to touch on a few things that you said and that Prosecutor Alm said. First of all, this thing about the expungement of records and allowing those who've been previously convicted of distribution getting to the front of the line. I don't know about you, but I'm just a common sense guy. And so for me, it seems weird that we would reward the very people that broke the law when they knew it was illegal and they were convicted of that. And then, as a reward, once we commercialize marijuana, we would expunge their record and give them front of the line to begin selling marijuana again and somehow expect that they will follow the regulations and the rules. I it just seems absurd to me, but I'm just a common sense kind of guy. I also want to touch on the DUI marijuana piece because Prosecutor All mentioned there is no consensus of scientific level of what defines marijuana intoxication. It isn't like alcohol, where you can identify that 0.08% of blood alcohol concentrate equals intoxication, because our field sobriety test decades ago established scientifically and academically that if a person exhibited these specific behaviors, you could identify that they were impaired under the influence of alcohol. None of those field sobriety tests identify someone who's impaired under the influence of marijuana. They were not set up for that. In fact, as I mentioned, most states, if they do have some sort of a law that prohibits the driving under the influence of marijuana, they're per se laws. And it means basically, like Nevada, for example, had 2 nanograms of milliliter of THC or its metabolites in your blood per milliliter. And the reality is that doctors will come in, scientists will come in and say that's garbage because there's no proof that 2 nanograms per milliliter in your blood means that you're actually intoxicated. And so therefore the reality is that there is no way to prove it. And so a lot of these states that are legalizing and commercializing marijuana are finding that they're not prosecuting anyone for being driving under the influence of marijuana because you cannot prove it. And so that is a significant danger on our roadways. As you mentioned, in Colorado, their traffic fatalities have gone through the roof as a result of legalization. In fact, the University of Chicago, Illinois, just put out a survey, a study that said that the states, they looked at 7 states that legalized, commercialized marijuana, 7 of them, one of them being my former state of Nevada. And they found on average that those 7 states, marijuana was associated with a 10% increase in motor vehicle accidents. And 4 of those states saw significant increases. Colorado was 16%, Oregon 22%, Alaska 20%, and California 14%. And so the dangers to our community are real, and it's occurring. So what about the employment piece that you guys have already talked about? You know, we could sit here and try to debate, should marijuana be illegal for adults or not, or should you be able to buy it from a regulated market versus the illicit market, and we'll agree to disagree. But the real question is, do you want your police officers smoking it on a daily basis? Do you want your school bus drivers that are pulling up to take your keiki to school in the morning being daily marijuana users? Do you want your other first responders, the paramedic that shows up to save your kupuna and tries to put an IV in their arm to provide life-saving medical, and yet they can smoke marijuana on a daily basis? The reality is that that's what we face. In fact, in New Jersey, the police union is suing a police department who's fired their police officers for having tested positive for marijuana. And at least two police officers got their jobs back. Policing is dangerous today, and it always has been. It requires our police officers to make life and death decisions in a moment. And unfortunately, we've seen many news highlights all across the country where mistakes have happened or police officers have made poor decisions that resulted in tragic incidents. Do we really want to tell them you can smoke marijuana every day and then go to work, strap on a gun? Do we think for a minute that our police officers will make better decisions being daily marijuana users with all of the scientific evidence that proves that it impairs their performance and their health over the long term? I don't think that's not what I want on my police department. I don't think that's what most of our community wants either. Can we address an increase in illegal activity, an increase in more car crashes, the illicit market on Kauai if this passes? And the same thing happens here that's happened in all the other states, okay? We're not looking at 21 years ago when I said, hey, all these bad things are going to happen. And they said, there's no proof of that. We have 23 states with proof now, and more proof every day that this is happening. I cannot afford to create a full-time marijuana unit that is just going out trying to target the illicit drug dealers and the cartels that will be here, setting up the most perfect soil in the world for growing marijuana in the perfect climate. I don't have that responsibility or that capability. In Nevada, when they legalized marijuana, I was the Organized Crime Bureau commander. And the irony of that was that in 2016, the year before it became legal, all of the proponents for legalization was claiming that it would get rid of the illicit market. And it's not fair. It will free up police resources to be able to go after the hard drugs if we just commercialize it and legalize it. A year later, I was getting bombarded by the marijuana industry's legal people demanding that I address the illegal markets that were popping up all over the place selling marijuana. It doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the dilemma a lot of us are in because of the promises, right? And I think, again, if you go on Google and search the benefits of legalizing recreational marijuana, you have you get information to put out a valid argument. But what this legislature did not do, and that's all I'm asking, is that if you're going to move towards legalizing recreational marijuana, then you should do your due diligence. And your due diligence is not a Google search. Your due diligence is actually taking apart the programs and the states that have legalized this, and evaluating the good and the bad, if there is any good. We already talked about the money. We already the money aspect, and it's costing a lot more. And then again, when the states have to cater to these industries because they're losing, they cannot make money because of the black market is still there, and it's in fact in many states, if not all, the black markets have become more powerful. And then you input the cartels in there that are basically funding these operations. It's a recipe for failure, and I don't understand how this legislature isn't seeing that. A concern of mine, and Doc, I want to ask you, because I think this is when a lot of people talk about marijuana as just smoking dope and whatever, but this whole thing with the edibles and the fact that Hawaii in the bill does not have a limit on what the THC content should be. What happens if a child ingests? I talked about this today at the council meeting. The Sour Patch Kids, that sour gummy bears or whatever that thing is out there. They have actually duplicated or replicated that design, and they call it the Stony Patch Kids. And the levels of THC are so high. What happens when a child inadvertently consumes one of those Stony Patch Kids gummies with a high level of THC? What happens?
Most of the time it's so high they will become unconscious or become difficult to arouse. They can have respiratory suppression. It will be so concentrated it will affect their respiratory. So when a child dies from edibles, which they have, And again, as I mentioned in my original discussion, the number of visits from the ER standpoint in states that have legalized are a significant increase, and across the country, and that also is tied to poison control, that they are, significant. But basically, it will be excessive sedation. In some cases, depending on how it affects a child, it could be seizures, but it's going to be the brain and CNS, and it's going to be a prolonged period of time of excessive sedation and lack of breathing. So, um, Mel, I do have another point. So, because I was listening so well to what you were saying, and I just want to add this on, and it's just a very simple point. And my point is, as we're talking about all these complications, I would love for all the viewers, listeners in our group and yourself to just tell me 5 years from now, after, say, we have legalization and we've opened dispensaries, please tell me what your thoughts are. Homelessness will remain the same, decrease, or increase? That's a big issue we're facing here in this state. Do we think that magically this is not going to worsen our homelessness epidemic? Um, I know what my thoughts are. So,
Well, I can actually answer that because I spoke with a pastor yesterday who had just come back from, believe it or not, Denver, and he was talking to a colonel from the Salvation Army in one of their kitchens. And prior to legalization, this Salvation Army unit was providing 250 meals per night for the homeless people in Denver. After legalization, they are up to 800 dinners per night. This is it was, it's so weird because he's a pastor. He called me about something completely different, but it was the day before our council meeting with the resolution. And again, God works in mysterious ways. But this was the troubling part. What the colonel, who basically originally was from Hawaii, told my pastor was many of those people that are picking up their meals, uh, 800 of them a night now, not a week, were telling him, because they all know each other, right? They build relationships, and they found out that he was from Hawaii. Many of them told them as soon as Hawaii legalizes marijuana, they are moving to Hawaii. I think if anyone thinks that homelessness will not increase when marijuana, recreational marijuana, gets legalized in Hawaii, then I think you guys need to pay more attention. It is going to increase just because I think it will be much better to be homeless in Hawaii than in Denver, Colorado. And I'm really concerned about that because, again, it goes back to, remember what I said earlier about the 450 cost for every dollar that comes in. In Hawaii, it might even be more because just because it's more expensive here. So the social impacts, and for those of you that have just joined and you see the little blank spot with Darius Keela, Representative Keela, he's in a finance committee meeting at the legislature. So unfortunately, he's not going to make it tonight. But yes, um, one question is: legalization of cannabis in Hawaii inevitable? Steve, I think you mentioned that earlier. Is that a reason to legalize marijuana because everyone else is doing it and because it's inevitable?
Absolutely not. We have we can make up our own minds about this kind of thing. And the numbers I gave before, 26 states looked at it in 2023, and only 5 said, let's legalize it. The other 21 rejected it. And what happens in a number of states that we don't have here is individual localities, individual counties are able to opt out. So they say no weed stores and they say no weed grows. And in the states like California, 68% of the localities have said no. In Colorado, 71. In New York, 60. In New Jersey, 71. They said, we don't want that here. But in Hawaii, it will be a statewide law. And we have criminals right now robbing game rooms, maybe controlled by organized crime. They know there's security guys there. They don't care. those same guys are going to be going after marijuana grows. They're just going to cut down the marijuana supplies of these illegal grows. And do you think those guys are going to want to do that? No, they're going to have security there. Real problems. And a few of the arguments we hear on the other side is alcohol is so much worse. Well, maybe there's true that alcohol causes lots of problems. Why would we add another problem onto it? As you said, and the doctor said, we don't have enough substance abuse treatment facilities right now for all the folks having problems with meth and coke and alcohol. We add in commercial marijuana, we're going to have more people needing treatment, and they're not going to be able to do it. And I do want to touch upon what you said at the beginning. The character of your state will change forever. In Colorado, they have 712 Starbucks and McDonald's combined. They have 1,038 marijuana stores. So it really does change the character of your city and your state forever. And we don't need to do that. And so it's really hard for the proponents to come up with any arguments that make sense when you listen to it, apart from my constituents want it, or maybe we can make some money off of it, which we don't think is true either.
Yeah, it's you know, and I gotta say, I respect everyone's opinion on this, and I think you know, it's unfortunate that the information is that is being put out by the proponents may not be completely accurate, or may not be the whole story, and I wish that they would be more forthright and sharing again what is happening in the states that have passed recreational marijuana. One of the questions: how can we stop the legislation? Well, you call your senators, you call your representatives. They're the ones that's in control. I know the bill is struggling in the House side, so for those of you that can reach out to your representatives, please do. It's much more. It's moving quicker, and in fact, it is moving out of the Senate. The Senate has approved it, so contact your senators and let them know how you feel. And the best thing you could do is share this video with on your pages. Share this video with the discussion we had tonight. With just put it on your page. Very simple. Just hit the share button. If you're on YouTube, you can do the same. It's vital that we let the people know the right information, because you make informed decisions if you get the right information. And I don't blame people for believing what they're being told. I think the story the chief shared with me, and I'm going to tell you today, I came across a gentleman who told me that he supported legalization until I shared a story that the chief shared with me. Ask them how would they feel about a drug house, a drug store, a marijuana store, a legal marijuana store next to their residence. And the person told me that changed my mind, because I did not think about that. Well, you better think about it, because if you walk down Portland, you every block or two there's a marijuana store, a very high end, well lit marijuana store, and there is no way we're going to be able to stop that, and it's going to happen. Why is Governor Green in favor of legalization? One of the questions, I think, is because I'm not sure. He's a medical doctor. I think he should be aware. I think, like all the legislators that support this, I think they're looking at the cash, the revenue, and like I shared with you, the states that have recreational marijuana, they're struggling with the revenues, and it's decreasing. Where can we find out where which senators voted for it? You can actually go to the legislature website, and you can click on the bills. Just type in marijuana, and because there's several bills floating around, and you can see exactly who introduced it and who voted for it. And again, you know, they're doing what they do. I'm not here to to call them out, but we have an opportunity to share our positions or our opinions with them, and hopefully that they can listen. So I know it's almost 8 o'clock. I want to respect your all time, but I also want to allow you guys to share some closing comments. I know we are getting some questions, but um, this is serious. I guess that's my closing thought, is that this is serious. So we'll go right down the line, and if you could just put out your closing comments, and share with our viewers what they should do next. Steve.
Okay, one thing that has not been mentioned is the military, and people get kicked out of the military for one positive test for marijuana. That hurts our readiness, and we're talking young men and women, dangerous age to make decisions. That's going to hurt our revenue, and all of the services are really concerned about that. Uh, the Senate bill, it's Senate Bill 3335, Senate Draft 1, is going to be heard Friday in Ways and Means, and in all likelihood is going to pass. The big fight will be in the House. So I'd urge everybody to call your representative and tell them you don't think this is a good idea. Please vote no when it comes up in the House. It'll destroy the character of our state, and let's keep Hawaii Hawaii. So no to commercial marijuana.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you for all your efforts. Again, I think you've become the face of this effort. But there's
And
so
I'm
many.
being accused of doing this for political reasons. I don't think this, with a number of folks, this is not a popular political decision, but I
Yeah,
never considered that. It's just, it's going to cause more problems for law enforcement. And my job as prosecutor is to protect public safety and protect the community. That's why I'm doing this.
yeah. With 74% of the population in favor, I think any politician that speaks out against it is not doing it for political reasons. And like I shared with the chief in our very personal discussion yesterday, I'll share with you all. If I lose the election because I fought against legalizing recreational marijuana, so be it. That's honestly, I am so concerned because my kids, as you all know, live in Oregon. My daughter moved to Texas, thank God. But in Portland, it has become. You remember when Portland was one of the most sought after cities? You remember? It's not anymore. My dad was living in Seattle. He's watching this and he said, "Do not legalize marijuana." And he comes from these guys. That's boots on the ground, and that's the people that legislature should talk to. Chief Raybuck.
Yeah, thank you, Mel. Thanks again for this. I just want to highlight and touch on just a few last topics that we talked about. You talked about the houseless. In Hawaii, we have a really significant problem with our houseless community, and for very good reasons. Some people just economically cannot afford to be here. When I was in Vegas and they legalized, I started seeing the people who were houseless or appeared to be houseless began to shift. A much younger group of people, a much
Yes.
different look about them, and a much different character. And I started engaging in some of them. And it's a group that they like to refer to themselves as campers or travelers. That is a whole different segment of homeless slash houseless people that do nothing but go from state to state or city to city looking for opportunities. And so, what you're talking about is those travelers, those campers in Colorado that moved there to get to the legalization. We'll be seeing those campers and travelers here as well. It's happened in Nevada, it happened in Colorado, it'll happen here. We always talk about the environment and how important our INA is here. And the reality is, we have the most amazing, pristine lands in the state, in my opinion. And years ago, they were polluted and damaged by illegal marijuana grows. And fortunately, we've gotten those down to almost nothing. When we start talking about the illicit drug trade that is going to happen as a result of the commercialization of marijuana, we're talking about drug traffickers moving into our most precious places on Kauai and polluting our streams, stealing our water, and leaving behind toxic chemicals and destroying our native species. It's super important. The last thing, or two last things, two last points. One is mainland marijuana companies. It's very clear that damaging impact. The governor was just talking about the mainland investors that have purchased all of these homes across the state for rentals, for short-term rentals, and the significant impact it's had on us economically and also on our residents and the ability to find housing. We will see a large boom of entrepreneurs moving into the state looking for these opportunities. They have money to spend. They'll come in here, they'll be starting to buy up our houses in our areas, land. In fact, it's already happening. The CEO and founder of a large marijuana company that's in Portland, that's in California, it's in the West Coast, has already purchased a home not far from mine, already purchasing land. In fact, approached a friend of mine allegedly and asked if he knew where he could rent some cattle for his ag land, and is looking to begin building his next 50 marijuana shops here in the state of Hawaii. So we will see an inundation of the mainland commercial marijuana companies moving in here and squeezing out our communities even further. And the last thing is this. Sorry, Mel, I know you're a politician, but there's one thing, one thing that politicians need to be elected, and that's money. And the reality is that in every state where this has happened, I watched in Nevada very ardent politicians in opposition of legalization and commercialization of marijuana change their positions once it was commercialized. Now, maybe it was the 70% that say that they support it. But, I think lobbyist dollars, legal lobbyist dollars from the marijuana industry is very, very pervasive and very, very powerful in swaying opinions and politicians. And so if we think that by commercializing this and emboldening an already growing, or should I say, budding lobbyist group for marijuana, and somehow that if this goes wrong, politicians are going to change their mind and retract from it, we're wrong. I hope everybody listening tonight thinks about the quality of their neighborhood right now. And they ask themselves, do we think it's worth risking our children's future? Because I can tell you this, in all my years of policing, I have never found one community, one family, or one child that is better with more intoxicating drugs in their lives. And that's what this bill is going to do to our state. Thanks, Mel.
Thank you, Chief. Yeah, again, I think, and I think we'll be accused of scare tactics. But again, this everything that has been said tonight, everything that has been said tonight is factual, and it has come from the jurisdictions that have legalized recreational marijuana. And if I ever get a check to my campaign, I will go live and I'll rip it. I mean, I'm a check from the marijuana industry or the lobby. I will go live and rip the check live in front of all of you. I would do that because, but I haven't. I haven't even been contacted. So, Dr. Miskovich.
I want to give a little bit of a bring it home elucidation to one of the things that the chief said. I'm not sure of the age group of our viewers that will see this, but if I know from our COVID times, we have some real good, strong, mature people, and the chief described the campers. Well, back when we were kids, those were we called them the stoners, and those were the people that you looked at them and they always seemed like they were out in a little bit of daze and they talked a little bit slow and nothing really bothered them and they didn't do anything. And those people back then, we now know with the training that we have, had a disease called substance use disorder. It chemically affected their brain and altered them to a point where they thought that was an okay way to go through life. And it was not a conscious decision as we all sat around and looked and pointed them and said, oh, they're just a stoner. And we now know it. Look what we're talking about now. What did they do? They used 2 or 3 times a day minimum. We all grew up and knew people like that, and they just basically faded off and didn't do anything with their lives. So we will have a lot of that, and I agree, man. They will come to Hawaii because everybody wants Maui Wowie, and then the second 2 things, I'm just kind of going off purely a little bit away from the medical part of this, and that is and we said, oh, it's going to sweep us. We have to do it. Well, guess what? Us in Utah don't and have not legalized gambling. And how long have we fought that? Because we're Hawaii and we are a state that watches our people and cares about our people. And from a public health perspective, we didn't want to create gambling addiction and know what that does to families. You want to talk about a broad issue with public health? Another thing, like I said, will homelessness get better or worse? Will public health in general improve or worsen with the introduction of commercialized marijuana on every corner? It will majorly worsen. I'm not making that opinion. It comes from all the other states, and Portland and Oregon is such a great example. They wish they could put that genie back in the bottle. And everybody in this, you guys probably all know that. A month ago, they announced a state of emergency, and they put it in a political state of emergency to try to put the cat in the bag because they were having so much crime and so many issues in their streets. So you can't put it back. And final point is, if I read correctly, and Prosecutor Owen will correct me, they didn't begin extending the rail project in Honolulu to attach to California. So therefore, there is no bridge, and therefore, if we don't, if we can't get those states and have it brought in here, if we don't legalize, we are safe. We're safe. So, anyways, that's enough.
Good point, Doc. You know, real quick, I had just come back from Washington, D.C. For our legislative conference and made it a point to speak to as many council members and commissioners from the states that legalized recreational marijuana that I could. And probably a dozen of them I got in touch with, and I was able to talk to face to face. And I asked them, and they all told me the same thing: don't do it. Don't do it. They regret that it's happening in their state. You mentioned gambling. Um, I look at this as they want to legalize recreational marijuana so they can raise funds so we can increase services to our population. The analogy I use is, should we legalize gambling so that we can generate fees and taxes to educate our young and our old about the dangers of gambling? That's the same thing, and that's what they're doing. They're putting the cart before the horse. I at the Honolulu Hale, I basically said it's ass backwards, and I believe that. I think it's ass backwards, and you cannot put the genie back in the bottle. You simply cannot do that. I just want to go back, and this will be my last comment. Some of you have asked how you can help. Well, I introduced a resolution on the council floor today, and it really was a simple resolution saying that the County of Kauai, Council of the County of Kauai, uh, opposes the legalization of recreational marijuana. And the initial draft was all of marijuana. We amended it today, so it doesn't include medical marijuana and it doesn't include the hemp industry. So it's specifically opposing the legalization of recreational marijuana. And I think I may have mentioned it earlier. We had a 3-3 split vote. So myself, Councilmember Carvalho, and Councilmember Kipukai supported the resolution, and Councilmembers Kagawa, Cowden, and Bulasan voted against it for various reasons. So it automatically defers for 2 weeks. So in 2 weeks, it'll come back on the agenda. Councilmember Billy DeCosta will be there. So we'll have the tie-break vote. So I urge all of you, in addition to contacting your senators and your state House of Representatives, if you're on Kauai, contact the county council members. You can send it to council testimony at kauai.gov, council testimony at kauai.gov, and let them know how you feel. Whether you support it or not, let us know how you feel. I think that's vital. So again, gentlemen, thank you so much. Again, Representative Kila could not be here. I hope to get him on at another time, and we're hoping that the state house maintains their course and does not support this. But only time will tell. In politics, as you know, Steve, anything can happen in the time until the thing is voted on. So, anyone else has anything else they want to say before we wrap this up? If not, thank you guys
Thanks
all.
for doing that.
No, I like I said, I'm gonna try to put a panel together for the people that are supporting. It's just hard to find people willing to come on. For those of you that are watching on YouTube, don't forget to go ahead and there you go. How's this cool thing? Hit the
Hey,
like button,
Mel,
hit the subscribe, and hit the bell. Yes,
Mel,
yes, sir.
can I say one? Can I say one more thing? I have
Abs-
to do this to you. Everybody, CDC today approved for 65 and older to get your updated COVID vaccination. So it's official. You can go as early as 4 months after your last vaccination. So it's approved for if you're immunosuppressed or 65 or older, get your update. Had to put COVID in here somewhere, buddy.
All right, gentlemen, and all of you viewers, we appreciate you guys. Thank you guys for your time. I know it's very valuable. You guys are busy people. For the village, we love you guys. God bless. We'll see you on the next one. Aloha. Take care. God.
Aloha.
God
Thank you.
Aloha.
bless. God bless.